Welcome everyone to today's online virtual workshop as part of our 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence campaign. We're excited to have our dedicated social worker, Heliany Marte, leading today's session on ending the silence, acknowledging gender-based violence and its impact on mental health. This workshop is a crucial part of our ongoing efforts to raise awareness about the different forms of gender-based violence. Be sure to check out our social media channels, which we'll share in the chat, and stay tuned for the 16 videos we'll be sharing throughout the campaign, which runs through December 10th. It started yesterday, and December 10th marks Human Rights Day. But remember that our fight against gender-based violence doesn't end on that day. It is a continuous effort that we must carry forward in community. We hope you find today's workshop insightful and empowering. Please note it is being recorded and will be shared afterwards, and I hope that you enjoy the session.
Thank you, Chamela, and thank you everyone for being here today. Welcome to our third and final workshop of our workshop series, Ending the Silence, Acknowledging Gender-Based Violence and its Impact on Mental Health. I am your presenter for today. My name is Heliany Marte. I am a social worker and clinician at VIP's Child and Adolescent program, and I will touch on both a little bit later. So this is today's agenda for our workshop. We just had a brief introduction. A little bit later, we will be doing an overview of VIP. Then we will go through our learning objectives for the workshop. After this, we will also be going through a self-care grounding exercise. And aside from this self-care exercise, I encourage everyone to participate in self-care whenever you feel you may need it today because of the sensitivity of our subject today. So if you need to get some air or get some water, whatever you need to help you feel more comfortable, feel free to do so. After this, we will be going through the presentation and also having some time at the end to answer any questions. So who we are, who is VIP? Founded in 1984, the Violence Intervention Program is the only organization in New York City led by and for Latinx survivors of domestic and sexual violence. So VIP is celebrating 40 years of providing services for DV survivors, and not only Latinx survivors, but people of all backgrounds. We are inclusive and we do not discriminate. We provide a host of culturally affirming programs to support survivors as they recover from trauma and break intergenerational cycles of abuse and poverty. So we do take on a holistic approach to the process of healing, and our focus is to restore hope, rebuild lives, and redefine the future. And what we do. So VIP operates 3 community-based social service programs, 2 residential shelter and housing programs, which are located throughout the boroughs of New York City. We have a helpline that is available Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. and is bilingual. We have a innovative economic justice program which helps our clients and survivors to gain economic independence. We also have a sexual violence project that works with our sexual violence survivors and is also becoming a more clinical-based program. Then we have our child and adolescent program, which I am a part of, and is our first clinical program here at VIP. We do provide trauma-focused based therapy to our children and adolescents who are witnesses to domestic violence as well as other traumas. And we have a robust community engagement team, which we just introduced Chamela, who's part of a community engagement team. And the community engagement team helps our clients and survivors to become more engaged in the community, as well as events, workshops, and also provides information to the community about domestic violence. So if you do want to learn more and see um, the community engagement team become involved in the community, check out our social media platforms, which we provided in the group chat. And our learning objectives. So our first learning objective for the presentation is to understand what GBV is and how it impacts survivors. Second is to understand psychological effects and long-term emotional impacts of GBV. Third is to identify ways to support survivors of GBV as well as coping strategies. And lastly, to leave with knowledge of resources available for GBV survivors. Okay, we've made it to our grounding exercise. As mentioned, we'll be doing a breathing exercise. It will be a somatic exercise. So feel free to get comfortable where you are currently seated. If you can feel your bottoms where you are seated and feel your feet on the ground. I invite you to close your eyes if you are comfortable doing so. And we will begin rubbing our hands together to create some heat in our hands because we will be placing our hands in different areas if we are comfortable with that, okay? So now that we create some heat, feel the warmth, we will begin by placing our hands on our face and we will take a deep breath in and out. Remember to use your stomach when you're breathing in and out. You can do this one more time. Next, we will place our hands gently on our chest and breathe in and out once again. We can feel our heartbeat one more time. Next, we will gently place our hands on our bellies, breathing in and out, feeling the movement of our bellies. And one more time. And lastly, we will place our hands on our laps and our thighs and taking one last deep breath in and out. One more time. Okay, now we can gently begin to open up our eyes once again and feel connected to our surroundings. Feel free to leave in the chat how you are feeling currently, if that helped you at all. If it didn't, be honest, but you can feel free to use this exercise as needed, either in the workshop or outside of the workshop. Glad to hear that from everyone. Thank you. So glad to hear that everyone is feeling more relaxed. I love this grounding exercise. Definitely will be practicing it more as well. Great. Okay, so we will be getting right into the content right now with our question, what is gender-based violence? Gender-based violence is any act or omission that may cause harm or suffering against any person or group of people based on their sexual orientation or identity, sex, or gender. So GBV can be perpetrated by anyone, not necessarily a partner. It can be perpetrated by a family member, a friend, someone who you may have thought was your friend, or most commonly, someone that you may know, and can also happen at any time or place. While all people, women, girls, non binary people, men and boys can be victims of gender based violence, the risks are highest for women and girls. So, because the risks are highest for women and girls, we will be focusing a little bit more on women and girls throughout this presentation, but we are emphasizing and acknowledging that all people can be victims. Okay, here we have some statistics that we may or may not know about. First one is specific populations or communities, including people of color, LGBTQIA+, and communities with fewer resources, experience domestic violence at even greater rates. A 2020 study from the Violence Policy Center found that 80% of Indigenous women, 40% of Black women, and 34% of Latina women will experience domestic violence at the hands of a partner in their lifetime. So we are seeing that those who identify with oppressed identities are more vulnerable to violence. About 1 in 4 women and nearly 1 in 10 men have experienced contact sexual violence, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner during their lifetime and reported some form of IPV-related impact. So when we look at these kinds of statistics, we want to keep in mind and consider that there are unreported cases. Many survivors choose not to report for many reasons, whether that may be feelings of fear or shame. For those who are undocumented, they might fear deportation. So they are not accounted for in these statistics. So these numbers may actually be higher in reality. Over 43 million women and 38 million men have experienced psychological aggression by an intimate partner in their lifetime. And this is, to clarify, only psychological, not physical. Forms of GBV happening in the US and across the world. Feminicide. Some 47,000 women and girls worldwide were killed by their intimate partners or other family members in 2020. This means that on average, a woman or girl is killed by someone in her own family every 11 minutes. This is a statistic from 2020. So again, the numbers might be higher currently or not. Female genital mutilation. Over 230 million girls and women alive today have undergone FGM in 30 countries, mainly Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. 44 million of those women were girls younger than 15 years old. So FGM is considered a harmful traditional practice. And because it's a harmful traditional practice, the undervaluing of women and girls and their rights go unrecognized. And also child marriage is considered a harmful traditional practice. Each year, total number of 12 million girls marry before the age of 18. That is 1 in 5 girls globally. Child marriage often compromises a girl's development by resulting in early pregnancy and social isolation, interrupting her schooling, limiting her opportunities for career and vocational advancement, and placing her at risk of domestic violence. So here we have a list of types of gender-based violence. It's not in any particular order. And again, these forms of violence can be perpetrated by anyone and at any moment. Sexual violence, any sexual act committed against the will of another person. It includes rape, sodomy, defilement, incest, sexual harassment, forced prostitution, etc. Physical violence. This is the intentional use of physical force with the potential to cause death, disability, injury, or harm. Emotional and psychological violence, inflicting of mental or emotional pain in a non-physical manner, usually by an intimate partner or a person in a position of power, to frighten, intimidate, manipulate, hurt, humiliate, or blame. Social or economic violence, maintaining total control over financial resources, withholding access to money, and or forbidding attendance at school or employment. usually done by an intimate partner or by laws and policies to equal opportunities. And lastly, harmful traditional practices, acts specific to cultures in which girls and women are severely undervalued and considered second class citizens with fewer rights. These include, as mentioned before, FGM, honor killings, and early marriages. So we have our first reflective question now that we've learned a little bit about GBV. And my question is, in what ways have you noticed GBV around you? So how can we recognize GBV around us, whether that be in the media, whether that be in our personal lives, in the community, can be in the workplace? How have we seen this manifested around us? Feel free to write in the chat. Policies and legislation, for a fact, especially right now in the political climate that we are facing, it's definitely a big one. Any other suggestions? No? Okay, so we can move on. All right. So a common question that we hear from people um, directed to survivors is why stay? Why would anyone stay in an abusive relationship? And in reality, it's not as simple as it may seem. There are many reasons, and here are just a small amount of reasons that a survivor may give for wanting to stay in a relationship. So it can be, I love him, I can't afford to leave. So survivors may be financially dependent on their abusers, and if they leave, they have no sources of income. It's not that bad. So undermining the situation, I don't have anyone else. Um, I don't have anyone else. So that not only is financial support, but maybe they don't have anyone that can provide shelter for them, can provide food. So they really don't have anywhere to go. It's my fault. I deserve it. So they may be feeling guilt. I'm scared. What about the kids? So this all is related to safety. Women who have children and are in these relationships, they are concerned for the safety of their children, the safety of their family members, and for the safety of themselves too, because if if they choose to leave, maybe the abuser might get upset and, cause them even more harm. So we see he loves me. That could mean love bombing. We see a lot of times abusers, they shower the survivors with gifts, whether that be flowers or expensive things to make it seem like they love them. So um, they may be gaslit. I'm ashamed. She didn't mean to. So that feeling of shame, feeling of fear, these are all valid reasons. And as mentioned, there are even more reasons. Okay, so for our second reflective question, so I would like if we can read the question and type in our answers in the chat box, and then we can press enter when I tell you to enter. Okay, so our question is, how might GBV affect the mental well-being of a survivor? So think about that for a second and write it in the chat box. Now that we've thought about a little bit what a survivor may be going through, what they might be thinking. Okay, some people have already started. So yeah, everyone can write in their answer now. Okay, so we have people saying depression, increased sadness and worry, sleep disturbance, PTSD, destroy a person's feeling of self-worth and confidence for sure. Stress, depression, guilt. It could decrease their confidence. Another one. Yes, PTSD, depression, feeling of hopelessness, low self-esteem for sure. Yes, isolation, lead to suicide. Yes, these are all correct answers, and we will be getting into them a little bit later on. So thank you for providing answers, everyone. Okay, GBV and mental health. Gender-based violence affects the psychological, emotional, physical health, and social well-being of the survivor, causing physical and/or mental illness. When a person's mental health is compromised, it will affect and influence the way they think, feel, and act. Mental illness can also determine how a person handles stress, how they relate to others, and how they weigh and deliberate on decisions. So here we have some indicators of how mental health or how GBV affects the mental health of survivors. And these are all longer term impacts. And as we can see, a lot of these are the same as what we answered in the chat, what we provided. So these are all correct. Depression, panic attacks, self-blame, sleeping problems, anger, feelings of guilt and shame, difficulty concentrating, unhealthy coping mechanisms such as use of alcohol and drugs, anxiety, self-harm, loss of education, ongoing relationship difficulties, impacts of PTSD, which many people mentioned as well in the chat, nightmares, dissociation, and flashbacks. So we will be getting into some of these later on. Okay, depression. GBV survivors are 3 to 5 times more likely to experience depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, substance use disorders, and suicidal thoughts. And here are some signs of depression in GBV survivors that may be feeling sad, irritable, or empty, feeling helpless, worthless, and hopeless, loss of interest or pleasure in activities. So that may be even interest in or pleasure in activities that they used to engage in, they no longer want to engage in, sleep and eating disturbances that can be not sleeping enough or not sleeping at all, or eating disturbances such as maybe not eating enough or eating too much. Feelings of humiliation, anger, and self-blame, inability to concentrate. That can be if they're at work, they're at school, in their relationships, or just in their day-to-day life. And as mentioned before, increased risk of suicidal thoughts or behaviors. Depression impacts survivors' relationships, work, and overall quality of life. Anxiety. Women who experience GBV are at 4 times increased risk of developing an anxiety disorder. Symptoms of anxiety in GBV survivors may be persistent worry and fear, hyper-awareness and hypervigilance. So this may be being overly concerned or hyper-aware of surroundings, of people around them, not trusting others around them, or being triggered by images or any sounds around them that may remind them of the event that occurred, insomnia, sleep disturbances, anger or irritability that may be shown in their own relationships, with their family, with their friends. People may notice that their mood has changed, rapid heart rate, sweating, so sweating in the palms of the hands or any part of the body, shortness of breath, and panic attacks. What is trauma? Trauma is the psychological, emotional response to a deeply distressing, disturbing, and life-threatening experience. Trauma can be an event that leaves us feeling unsafe and helpless, can be a one-time experience or a repeated experience, overwhelms our capacity to cope, and witnessing a traumatic event that threatens the life or physical safety of a loved one can also be traumatic. So, when thinking of trauma, we're also thinking about other forms of trauma because it's not just GBV. It can be, as mentioned, threat the life of the physical safety of a loved one, witnessing them becoming ill, um, surviving a natural disaster, a car accident. There's many forms of trauma, and GBV is one of them. Here we have some physical signs your body is releasing trauma. So that may be shaking of the legs, of the hands, crying, again, sweating of the hands or any part of the body, changes in breath and breathing, so shortness in breath, muscle tension, and heart pounding, so fast or accelerated heart rate. What are common reactions to trauma? So we just read some physical responses, and we have some more listed here that can be insomnia or disrupted sleep, fatigue, so overly tired, muscle tension, a lot of headaches they may experience, or chest pain, and also chronic unexplained pain or health challenges. On the left side, we have some emotional and behavioral responses to trauma that can be denial, confusion is very common, feeling confused, feeling angry, fear, guilt, anxiety, depression, flashbacks to the event, difficulty concentrating, and withdrawing from friends and family. Here we have the impact of GBV on women's health. So this is specific to GBV and women's health, not people of other genders, but specific to to women. Reduced life expectancy. The World Bank estimates that rape and domestic violence account for 5% of the healthy life years of life lost to women aged 15 to 44 in developing countries. Death, fatal outcomes as immediate result of a woman being killed by the perpetrator or as a long-term consequence of other adverse health outcomes that can be mental health problems resulting from trauma that can lead to suicide, alcohol abuse, HIV infection, or cardiovascular diseases. Physical harm. Physical harm can be injuries, function impairments, permanent disabilities. Reproductive health consequences might be pelvic inflammatory disease, STDs, unwanted pregnancy, UTIs, or respiratory disorders. Some negative, go backward. Some negative coping skills are alcohol and drug use, as we mentioned before, smoking, sexual risk-taking, or self-injuring behavior. Some somatic consequences may be chronic pain, irritable bowel syndrome, gastrointestinal disorders, UTIs, and respiratory diseases. And lastly, psychological consequences that may be PTSD, depression, fear, sleeping disorders, suicidal thoughts, and low self-esteem. Okay, so now just to kind of have an overview of what we've learned here, we have a video of consequences of GBV. Hope you enjoy.
Gender-based violence has multiple consequences, which vary from person to person and from situation to situation. Survivors suffer short-term and long-term consequences. The scale and intensity of the consequences vary, but they are inextricably connected, which explains why survivors can go on to experience personal, professional, and social difficulties. The impact of gender-based violence on the victim's physical and mental health is often the first consequence that comes to mind. It can be difficult for the victim to speak out about the violence. They may blame themselves and experience shame. They may also express or feel anger as a result of their suffering. Their trauma may also lead them to become withdrawn, and it can trigger depression and PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, in the form of stress, anxiety, intrusive thoughts, or even amnesia. Although these consequences can vary both in intensity and duration, they can influence the victim's health, causing insomnia, eating disorders, and even skin conditions. Isolation and withdrawal can affect personal, social, and professional relationships, particularly if the victim cannot count on support and understanding from the people close to them. Sometimes isolation can go unnoticed by others because one of the possible consequences of GBV is absenteeism from school or work. Work and studies can also be negatively impacted. The victim may suffer from problems concentrating, a lack of motivation, or low self-esteem, which all affect their performance at school or work. There may also be an impact on their material and financial living conditions when the consequences mentioned above lead to medical or legal costs, job loss, loss of accommodation, and/or a breakdown in personal relationships. To conclude, gender-based violence can have far-reaching consequences in all spheres of daily life. Raising awareness and dealing with these consequences is a challenge of major importance for public health and society.
Okay, hope that video was helpful. Okay, we will be moving along now to coping strategies for survivors. So here we have some listed, and before we list them, I would like to mention that not all coping strategies are a best fit for all survivors. They may need to try out some coping strategies to see what fits best and what works best for them. They also might need to change coping strategies every now and then and see if anything works better or if it stops working and they need to try something different. These are different ideas and tips that they can use to alleviate some of their symptoms. So emotional coping. That can be talking to someone, preferably trauma-informed counseling or therapy. They can try practicing self-care. That may be doing something that they enjoy, prioritizing themselves, whatever that may look like. Journaling. This might not be a good fit for all survivors because there are survivors who do still live with their abusers, so it may not be the best choice. Learning to name emotions can be very impactful and very empowering for survivors, so it's important that they are able to do that. And express emotions through creativity and calming techniques. So that can be art, drawing, painting, coloring is very helpful, or any forms of creativity. Physical and mental wellness, that may be exercise, mindfulness, grounding exercise, like what we did earlier today. Having some or enough sleep is important, hygiene, and relaxation techniques. So again, deep breathing, maybe meditation. Again, meditation might not be great for everyone, so they might want to try it out and see if that works or not for them. Support system. So support system can be joining support groups. That can be any support group, whether it be a parenting support group, anything that helps them feel connected to others and supported, connect with trusted individuals and community groups. So that can be religious or not. If they are tied to some religion, it is helpful that they can gain some sort of support as much as they can. Okay, and here we have an example of two coping strategies that you can use with survivors. On the left, we see the box breathing exercise. So this box breathing exercise is basically where the survivor can trace out a box using their index finger, and they will use each end of the box to breathe in or breathe out, breathe in or breathe out. And we actually have an example of this box breathing exercise on our Instagram page. So feel free to check that out if you want to see a more visual example of the box breathing exercise. And on the right side, we have the emotion sensational wheel. This is a tool that we can help survivors identify and name their feelings, their emotions, and see how these feelings or emotions may be tied to their physical reactions. So we see happy, we can see some different emotions for happy and how we might see happiness in our bodies. We see sad emotions, how sad emotions can be portrayed physically, as well as disgust, anger, fear, and surprise. So if you do want to see more of these kind of resources, you can check them out online. Very helpful to have the survivors be able to name their feelings and see and recognize how they're being manifested. Oh, and we have here the breathing exercise on Instagram. The link is on the chat if you want to see it. Thank you, Maria. Okay, so how can I help? Whether you are a service provider or you're someone who knows a survivor, um, these are some things that you can do to help. So firstly, you can tell survivors you believe them, that it's not their fault and help is available. We want to avoid victim blaming. We want to validate their feelings. So let them know that what they're feeling is normal, that it's okay to feel the way that they are feeling given their situation and their circumstance. We want to listen without interrupting, give them that space to speak freely and not being so quick to respond. Offer support and resources when they're ready. So we want to be able to let the survivor take autonomy and make decisions on their own and be able to choose what they want to do in their situation. Do not judge or label the partner. As mentioned, a lot of survivors still live with their abusive partners, so we want to avoid labeling their partners, or we want to avoid judging that decision that they have made. Encourage survivors to seek professional help. Again, we are encouraging, we're not pushing it. So we might want to list out, what are the benefits? How can professional help be useful and helpful for you? Okay, here are 7 ways you can help end violence against women and girls in your community. First, educate yourself on violence against women, which we are already doing today. Second, believe GBV survivors. 3, help at-risk people access GBV services. Offer practical assistance and share resources with GBV survivors, which we've already started to name and will continue to offer some resources at the end. Speak out against all forms of violence. Promote respect and empathy for GBV survivors, and respect and embrace diversity. All right, and here we do have some resources. We have the crisis text line website. We have the suicide prevention hotline. We also listed the Family Justice Center, which is located in every borough of New York City. And they are available Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. The Family Justice Center helps in providing legal services if needed, helping obtain any financial or public assistance, or to provide services, any kind of services, whether that be mental health. We also have the National Domestic Violence Hotline, as well as the New York City 24-hour Domestic Violence Hotline. Okay, and here we have a flyer and some information for our Parenting Journey Support Group. I will be co-facilitating this support group starting in January. It is a 12-week support group for parents, guardians, and caregivers via Zoom or in person. And this parenting support group is to help parents connect with other parents and obtain support, build sense of community, also to help gain some coping techniques and to better handle stress, as well as reflect on their childhood and as well as on their own parenting. So these clients who attend the sessions will receive a certification and a $50 incentive. There is a requirement to identify as Latinx because this parenting support group will be held in Spanish. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact Michelle Balandra, my supervisor. Her email and phone number is here. Will you email the flyer to participants? We can do that maybe, or provide a link in the chat box. Or you can take a picture, and if you have questions, you can email the email here or call the phone number to sign up, or if you want more information about referrals. And thank you all for staying tuned to this workshop. Here I have provided some of our contact information. We have our phone number, our hotline. Again, it's Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. We have our email, info@vipmujeres.org, and our website. So be sure to connect with us on our social media and ask any questions if you have. Thank you all. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, or if you have any comments, thoughts, let us know. Thank you so much for being here.